All right, welcome. And in this video, I'm going to show you mostly a time lapse of putting on one piece of planking on the side of the sailboat. So I already have several pieces of planking prepared, and they're all about 20 feet long, a little bit more, probably more like closer to 21 feet long. So I'm going to take the top one there, which I've already previously put on the side of the sailboat and clamped it in place and just let it sit there for a few days to get accustomed to the curve, and it's ready to go on. The boards themselves have already been sanded, but the first step I need to do is a quick sanding of the sailboat itself. All right, so let's get started. The sanding is done, and I needed to pay extra attention to the corners like this, and especially up here. And I also did a quick sand inside here a bit also. So let's see, the next thing I'm going to do is mark off the lines of where the glue is going to be. So to mark these lines, all I needed to do was take a scrap piece of wood and put it here and then mark that off with a pencil. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is put this planking up here and temporarily clamp it in place and place marks on the planking of where it's going to line up with the bulkheads. So what I mean for this is I temporarily clamp this board in place and then use the pencil to draw a line along here and along here, for instance. And I did that for each of the bulkheads there and there at the front and at each of the bulkheads to the back as well. So after vacuuming everything with the shop vac, I'm going to now wipe everything off with a little bit of denatured alcohol. Now that everything is wiped down and marked, it's time to start mixing the epoxy. So it's a little cool tonight. It'll probably get down just below freezing. So I'm going to be using the fast hardener this time. So I have the fast hardener, and that one will cure down to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'll be able to keep that temperature in the garage here quite well, especially with the little heater going if I need to raise the temperature up a little bit. But because it's a fast hardener, I'm going to be mixing this epoxy up in smaller batches than I normally do. What I would normally do is I would mix up 4 pumps of unthickened epoxy, and I would spread that unthickened epoxy across all of the glue joints, and that 4 pumps is enough to do both the boat and the piece of planking. And then after that is done, I would start mixing up the thickened epoxy. And what I'm going to do tonight with the fast hardener is I'm going to do just 2 pumps at a time. And this will work out even with the fast hardener, because by putting the unthickened epoxy down across all the glue joints, even if the epoxy does start to become unworkable, that epoxy will still be sticky and it'll still join together just fine. So, all right, so let me start mixing up some epoxy and spreading it across. All right, so that took a little longer than I expected. I did have a can of fast hardener that I'd not used in a long time, and when I tried to pump it out, the pump was not working properly. It's been probably at least a year since I tried to pump any of that out. So I had to switch over to a new pump. And I thought I had some extra pumps, but it turns out that I was already using both of the pumps for that, for this size. So I had to take the pump off of the previous hardener that I was using, the slow hardener. So I had to make sure to get all of the slow hardener out of that one, and I think it should now be working. The epoxy that I had started to mix, I threw that out because it was not mixed properly. And this is another reason why when I mix the epoxy, I always do, so let's say I want to do, 3 pumps or 4 pumps or whatever. I don't do, 3 or 4 pumps of just the epoxy and then switch over to the hardener. I do 1 pump of the epoxy and then 1 pump of the hardener, and then go back and do another pump of the epoxy and another pump of the hardener. And not only does this make sure that I never lose count and get to the hardener and wonder, wait a minute, how many pumps have I already done? And then, I got to throw it all away again because, I lost count. So this way I never lose count. And if there's anything wrong with the pumps, well, the most I lose is just, maybe 1 or 1.5, maybe at most 2 pumps or whatever, if there's a mistake somewhere and I have to start over. So, all right, so now I'm going to start mixing up the 2 pumps of epoxy. Well, the battery in my time-lapse camera just ran out, so I thought I would give you a close-up here of the thickened epoxy that I'm applying. I had to change my gloves anyway to change the battery. So I thought I'd bring this camera out and show you this one. Now, I don't know how long this battery is going to last in the time lapse, so I'll capture as much as I can. All the thickened epoxy has now been applied with special attention to make sure that I put some extra thickened epoxy at the very front. And now it's just a matter of putting the plank onto the boat and line up the marks that I made earlier. So I'm going to turn the time-lapse camera back on, so hopefully you can see some of that action. All right, I'm not sure how much you saw of the time lapse, but I got the piece of planking clamped onto all of the bulkheads, all the way to the front. And I also have to press it down against the planking below it. So that's why you'll see some of the clamps are configured to spread instead of to clamp. So they can push on the bridge deck stringer from above and push down on the planking below to push that planking all the way down to the piece of planking below it. So, all right, the next step is to get the excess epoxy that you can see is squeezing out. So I need to get all that scraped off. All right, everything is done and the tools are cleaned up, and I have the clamps on in the middle, in between each bulkhead, to line up the plank with the one below it. And let me show you the very front as well. All of the excess epoxy that I scraped off of the joint, instead of just throwing it away, I apply it to the inside here, and then I put a piece of peel ply to cover it, so that, yeah, that's it. All right, so I'm going to get this video edited and see exactly how much of the time lapse I have to show you. So I'll include as much as that as I can. All right, bye.